WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 p.m. in Abuja. Good afternoon, and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on WADR.org. This is Newslink. First, our top stories. Health professionals in Senegal embark on a warning strike as state readies to host dialogue to address social issues.
The situation is difficult for everyone. For workers, life is expensive. So the world's concerns are there, and rights are sometimes violated. And we saw waves of redundancies, situations that deserved to be raised. And that's what we did.
Beninese President Talon commissions an electoral review committee ahead of the 2026 elections.
In general, any end of a mission generates a renewed sense of virtue, a renewed commitment to the service of good in an absolute way. This approach is to be applauded, so you can count on my enthusiasm.
The African Development Bank, AFDB, reaffirms support to the Gambia in achieving set socio-economic priorities, and Kush, a synthetic narcotic drug, threatens the future of West African youth, says Global Initiative Against Organized Crime. Details of these stories and more coming up shortly.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us, and welcome to our listeners within and outside the sub-region. We begin right here in Senegal as the Autonomous Union of Health Workers embarks on a nationwide strike beginning today, February 26, 2025. The industrial action comes on the heels of the social dialogue by the state scheduled for Thursday, February 27. The meeting, to be chaired by Senegalese Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, aims to find lasting solutions to socio-economic challenges the country faces. The dialogue announced last week by Ousmane Sonko at the National Assembly was welcomed by the country's trade union centers. The centers are already preparing to submit their demands and urge the government to lead a frank discussion. Augustine Colley reports.
The Autonomous Union of Doctors of Senegal would from today, Wednesday, February 26, embark on a nationwide strike as it prepares for a social dialogue tomorrow, Thursday. The public sector health workers are demanding, among other things, massive recruitment of doctors, pharmacists, and dental surgeons to the civil service, as well as improved health coverage. Facing the Prime Minister on Thursday, the summit intends to defend its positions and hope to win its case. Jabel Dramé is the Deputy National Secretary General of SAMES.
The fact that the deadlines are opening up differently is an argument against an argument, because Senegal, too, has always been a country of dialogue. The situation is difficult for everyone. For workers, life is expensive. So the world's concerns are there, and rights are sometimes violated. And we saw waves of redundancies, situations that deserved to be raised, to be heard, and that's what we did.
The National Confederation of Senegalese Workers intends to speak on behalf of all workers. Mode Giro is the General Secretary of the CNTS.
What we expect from the government is that it will pay particular attention for us and that we will be able to enter into discussions. Unfortunately, to date, there has been no frank discussion. We approved of the Prime Minister's appeal and we are going to listen to him and see what he proposes. If there is a need for clarification, we will clarify it about our platform's demands, and then we'll be able to assess the follow-up. We'll give it to our movement.
The social dialogue opens this Thursday at 3:30 p.m. at the Dauda Njai Kumba Rose National Theatre. The aim of the talks is to reach, and I quote, a stability pact, according to Senegalese Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko.
Augustine Colley with that report. Let's cross over to Guinea, where former ministers, clerics, businessmen, and academics have initiated talks on how to renew dialogue between the Guinean transitional authorities and socio-political actors. The three-day exercise that kicked off in Conakry on Tuesday hopes to calm tension in the country and guarantee a peaceful transition. Several leaders of political parties, civil society organizations, press associations, and representatives of the Guinean government and presidency are also attending the meeting. Christopher Tichu has won the full report.
Amid a political crisis between the ruling military and the political parties and organizations involved in the management of the transition process, several Guineans have decided to reinitiate dialogue between the key players in the crisis. The new platform is known as the Forum for Citizens Dialogue. This new framework for dialogue aims to raise awareness of the importance of reconciliations and the need to re-establish trust between those in power and the socio-political parties. Usman Dadi Kamara, president of the RGT party, and Abubakar Somwa, president of the GDE party, seem to be getting the message. At the end of the proceedings, a memorandum containing recommendations will be submitted to the president of the transitional government to initiate an inter-Guinean political dialogue as soon as possible. General Mamadou Diomboye's response through the stakeholders dialogue should put an end to the political crisis the initiators have promised.
WADR's General Alpha Ibrahim Balde's report voiced by Christopher Atichu. In Benin, President Patrice Talon has met with members of the steering committee for the audit of the computerized electoral list. The meeting at the Marina Palace was an opportunity for President Talon to reaffirm the committee's mission and make firm recommendations. HRTC reports.
The Electoral Register steering team is made up of members of civil society and governance experts, including Jean-Baptiste Elias, Gustave Assa, Mudasiru Bachabi, Michel Alokbo, and Kasimu Chabi. In a speech, President Patrice Talon urged them to remain neutral during their mission. For him, the audit of the list must be carried out in a very objective manner and outside the scope of any partisan influence. He added that the audit should hardly be perceived as a questioning of the electoral code or the holding of a national meeting.
In general, any end of a mission generates a renewed sense of virtue, a renewed commitment to the service of good in an absolute way. This approach is to be applauded. It's a form of civilian support. And as you know, I'm always enthusiastic about anything that's in our common interest. So you can count on my enthusiasm.
The meeting provided an opportunity for a direct exchange of views on the modalities of the audit and the guarantees of independence of the experts involved. Jean-Baptiste Elias is the chairman of the steering committee for the audit of the Electoral Register.
This is technical, scientific work that has nothing to do with political connotations.
The meeting between the steering committee and the head of state follows the decision by the Council of Ministers on Wednesday, February 19, to grant a sum of 159 million CFA francs for the audit of the Electoral Register.
A report by our Cotonou correspondent Aziz Adam Sule and voiced by Eche Atisu. Elsewhere in Mauritania, jailed former President Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz is facing strong opposition from the state prosecutor's office as he appeals his earlier sentence. This follows a request by prosecutors that a 20-year jail term be imposed on Abdelaziz for abuse of office and embezzlement. This will mean a significant increase to his current 5-year sentence. The lead prosecutor, Sidi Mohamed Ould Moulay, told the court in Nouakchott that the former leader had transformed the presidency into an office for blackmailing investors.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Remember, we're live on Facebook at WADR English Service and on YouTube at WADR News. To some developmental news, the Gambia has been reaffirmed by the African Development Bank of its commitment to fostering a sustainable economy in the country. President Adama Barrow received this assurance when a 7-man delegation from the Continental Financial Institution arrived in Banjul on Tuesday. Discussions focused on enhancing the partnership between the AFDB and the Gambia, improving infrastructure, and boosting job creation across the country. WADR's Sankule Janko in Banjul has the rest of the details.
7 executive directors from the African Development Bank, AFDB, held a closed-door meeting on Tuesday with President Adama Barrow to reaffirm the bank's continued support toward the nation's development. Discussions focused on enhancing the partnership between the AFDB and the Gambia, fostering sustainable economic growth, improving infrastructure, and boosting job creation across the country. Gambia's Finance Minister Sidi Keita addressed the press after the high-powered meeting.
They have briefed the President to inform the Gambian authorities of the bank's commitment to deepen the relationship between the Gambia and the African Development Bank. The executive directors are here to see for themselves the impact of some of their interventions on the lives and livelihoods of the Gambians.
Speaking on behalf of the AFDB delegation, Dr. Nomfondi Zainia Nwenya expressed the bank's dedication to supporting the Gambia's development priorities.
We look forward to seeing a number of the projects over the coming days in the Gambia. We are also meeting with various stakeholders, so we don't only engage with government. We place a lot of importance on discussions with civil society, with women's groups, with the youth, with the private sector, all the actors who are so central to making sure the African Development Bank's 10-year strategy is implemented successfully.
This meeting aimed at reinforcing the ongoing collaboration between the Gambia and the African Development Bank in achieving long-term socio-economic transformation. The African Development Bank has since 1974 committed over $464 million to various projects across the country. Flossing in West African Democracy Radio, I am Sankule Janko reporting from Banjul.
Ghana's Trades Union Congress, TUC, has called on President John Dramani Mahama to intervene and halt the ongoing termination of public sector appointments following a directive from the Chief of Staff. The union wants that the mass revocations, which include appointments made before December 7, 2024, could have devastating effects on young professionals and undermine confidence in the country's governance system. From Accra, Nadiri Tete reports.
In a statement dated February 25, 2025, the Trade Union Congress TUC raised strong concerns over the 10th February directive from the Chief of Staff Julius Debra calling for the annulment of all public service appointments made after December 7, 2024. The TUC described the directive as problematic and open to abuse, citing reports of widespread job revocations, including cases where individuals on long-term contracts had their appointments terminated. The Chief of Staff directive issued to all heads of government institutions claimed that appointments made after the specified date were not in line with good governance practices. However, the TUC argues that this move has led to mass job losses, particularly among young professionals who recently secured employment. The statement also criticized the ruling government for engaging in a political pattern that has been seen in the past transitions, where outgoing and incoming administrations have disputed appointments made towards the end of a government's tenure. The TUC referenced similar actions taken in 2016, highlighting what it calls inconsistencies and political hypocrisy in handling such issues. Calling on President John Dramani Mahama to intervene, the TUC urged the government to halt the ongoing job terminations and extend amnesty to affected workers, similar to the one granted to security recruits hired by the previous administration. The labor union warned that continued revocations could damage Ghana's democratic credibility and weaken the patriotism of young citizens striving for employment stability. For WADR, Nadiri Tete, Accra.
In Liberia, the House of Representatives on Tuesday elected new representatives to the ECOWAS Parliament, signaling a change in the country's legislative leadership at the regional level. This decision comes in the wake of the recall of the previous representatives who were removed due to controversies surrounding their selection process and adherence to ECOWAS protocols. As WADR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports, this election aligns with Article 18 of the ECOWAS protocols.
The push for a change in representation was initiated by Representatives James Collette of Bond County and Johnson Williams of River G County, raising concerns about the previous appointments. They criticized the process as lacking transparency and proper consultation under the leadership of the embattled Speaker Fonanti Kofa.
Article 18A says representatives shall be elected by direct universal sovereign.
The newly elected members, Augustine Chelo from the ruling Unity Party, Samson Weah of the Opposition Congress for Democratic Change, and Mwema Briggs Mensah, an independent candidate who retains opposition. In response to their election, the new representatives pledged to ensure Liberia's presence and influence within the ECOWAS Parliament.
Regional peace, regional integration, regional economy. So that's the vision we are taking to the ECOWAS.
We stand for democracy
crisis, and that's what happened here.
When asked about the decision to replace the former representatives, Senator Edwin Melvin Snow, head of the Liberian delegation to ECOWAS, deemed the House's action as impossible, expressing doubts about the future of these changes.
Protocol at the ECOWAS Parliament is different. Recalling of members is not as easy as you think it is.
If the House's decision is upheld, the new representatives will succeed Representatives Samuel Ennis and Ta Wangwe. In Monrovia, reporting for Newslink, April and Parker on WADR.
You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and live on wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Health professionals in Senegal embark on a warning strike as the state readies to host dialogue to address social issues. Beninese President Talon commissions an electoral register review committee ahead of the 2026 elections. The African Development Bank reaffirms its support to the Gambia in achieving set socio-economic priorities. Still ahead in the news, Kush, a synthetic narcotic drug, threatens the future of West African youth, says Global Initiative Against Organized Crime. We also have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Many thanks for staying with us. Now, a new report by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime indicates that the ECOWAS sub-region is facing a drug evolution marked by the distribution and widespread consumption of Kush. Kush is a type of synthetic drug that first surfaced in Sierra Leone in 2010 but is now found in neighboring countries. The report by the international organization states that the current scale of the Kush market and its impact on public health are unprecedented. To prevent the phenomenon from escalating further in the coming months, the global initiative calls for immediate international mobilization to tackle the issue. Francis Boniface has more in the following report.
The report describes Kush as a potent synthetic drug causing a major health crisis, daily deaths, and security threats in West Africa. In 2024, Liberian President Joseph Boakai and his Sierra Leonean counterpart both declared a state of emergency on drug abuse. Michael Gipley, an expert on narcotics and former director of media at the Liberian Drug Enforcement Agency, says the declaration has significantly contributed to addressing the crisis. The authors of the report reveal that Kush, now in countries such as Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, the Gambia, and Senegal, contains chemicals like nitazenes, as well as synthetic cannabinoids. Asked about the composition, Gipley says,
"We've not been able to establish that because we do not have, the kind of laboratory to determine what chemical is used to produce or rather to increase the potency of Kush. But it's not just a completely synthetic drug. It has some natural composition also that is taken from a natural plant."
China, the United Kingdom, and the Netherlands are the main exporting countries of these chemicals needed to make Kush, according to the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crimes. The substances are imported mainly by sea and increasingly via postal services. Michael Gipley, an expert on narcotics, recommends ways to reduce the spread of Kush and other narcotics in the sub-region.
I feel and think that the approach towards the fight against drug abuse is holistic and inclusive, which would include the increase in manpower, the number of manpower recruited in the institutions to fight drugs, the number of support that the institution have to its disposal, and of course the political will. We also need to commensurate that with a strong legislation, which we already have. But again, around the world, there's nowhere you fight drugs without money. So when you want to deal with the fight against drug abuse, it means all hands needs to be on deck.
Poverty, peer pressure, and high unemployment have been blamed for the increasing number of youth turning to substance abuse.
A report filed by Francis Boniface.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Well, for today's press review, let's join WADR's Sankle Jankwe in Banjul.
Hello there and welcome to this edition of the Press Review coming to you from Banjul, the Gambia. Let's begin with the Standard newspaper today. And the Standard newspaper's lead story reads, controversy over ASP Binta Njai's response to NPP supporters' comments. Well, interestingly, Binta Njai is the former police spokesperson and still serving in the police. She responded to a controversial comment made by one of President Barrow's staunch supporters, who criticized the people of Kiang for not voting for President Barrow's National People's Party. He described them as backwarded people. Binta was not very, very pleased, and she also vent, her feelings towards this particular individual. However, she said she spoke as an individual who hailed from Kiang, not as a police person. Jame reacts to rebellious NAM with expulsion. Bakari Baji is an independent National Assembly member, and he has reportedly been expelled by ex-President Jame after Bakari Baji declared his intention to run for election in 2026. Man gets 20 years for raping wife, younger sister, a minor. But this other one reads, ECOWAS advised to engage UN, AU in Gambia's constitutional building process. Now let's move on to the Fourier newspaper. And the Fourier newspaper's lead story today reads, a farmer dies in road accident while traveling to withdraw earnings. This other one reads, Parliament to ratify visa exemption agreement with UAE. Bugler sentenced to 10 years in prison. Now let's move on to the final newspaper for today, and that is the Point newspaper. And the Point newspaper's lead story today reads, $30 million petroleum products investigation report to be tabled. That is according to the Point newspaper's lead story, with the photo of Alaji S. Dabo, the chairperson of the FPAC committee. This other story reads, Yaya Jame expels Honorable Bakari Baji from APRC. That's another story. Please say former PRO not arrested, interrogated. That's another story on the Point newspaper. ECOWAS still pivotal to Gambia's transition. New advisory asks government to fully implement SSR. And the final story for today reads, alleged PIU shooter denies ownership of mobile case. I'm afraid these are the major stories making headlines on Gambian dailies, and it's back to you in the studio.
WADR's Sankule Janko Banjo with the Press Review.
Politics,
analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest this afternoon is an expert on narcotics and former spokesperson of the Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency who comments on the country's fight against drug and substance abuse. Michael Gipley speaks about the dangers of drug abuse, particularly Kush, a type of synthetic drug now prevalent in countries of the Manu River Union and beyond. The last time he spoke to us was shortly after the declaration of a state of emergency on drugs by Liberian President Joseph Boakai. However, several months since that proclamation, what has changed? But essentially, how have youth been impacted by Kush addiction?
So when Kush entered Liberia, unknowingly, the young folks who resulted into taking it, there were a lot of, difficult situations recorded where a lot of young people lost their life owing to its potency, and some of them were near insane, and why the vast majority struggle to get used to the potency or the resistance of the drug, and to the extent where a lot of young people are falling prey. And I can tell you that alone have increased the number of drug users in our country. And of course, it has also created a kind of challenge where security are nearly overwhelmed, especially when it comes to the issue of drug abuse. And that is owing to the many challenges state security continue to face, especially the LDA, which is the nation's lead institution responsible to control the fight against drug abuse in our country.
Well, can you speak to the multi-sectoral approach in the fight against drug abuse, in particular Kush?
Definitely. I think the multi-sectorial approach in the fight against this menace has elevated, the core, has also elevated the fight. I can remember when I once served as a spokesperson of the LDA in 2020, we began the quest of ensuring, a kind of robust drug law that will address the practical realities of our drug situation in our country. And during this period, we had a lot of collaborations from both national and international partner that saw the amendment of our nation's drug law that now addresses the practical reality when it comes to the offenses of drug crime in our country, incarceration, and other referral approaches to deal with the issue, especially with respect to people who are dependent on drugs. And that sectorial approach, I saw the Ministry of Health aligning with the LDA, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Youth and Sport, the Ministry of Gender, the Governance Commission, and even ECOWAS, and equally supported by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, where several multi-sectorial dialogue were organized and people came up with expert opinion and derived a kind of national approach that was geared towards tackling the fight conclusively and collaboratively in dealing with these situations. Why it's true that, on the other hand, we are radical and very critical on enforcement.
You've talked about the multi-sectoral approach to tackling the drug menace in Liberia, which I think applies in countries of the Manu River Union. But one question remains: what is it that really pushed young people to drug and substance abuse?
The history of drug abuse in our country has dated far back even before, the political insurrections owing to several years. So again, in our society here, unlike others, maybe as a result of poverty could be one factor, peer pressure could be another factor, and of course the devastating experience of our 14 years of political instability could also be one of the beginning factors for young people indulging into drug activities in our country.
Now, how can national governments address the issue of drug and substance abuse, be it kush or any other type of drug?
I feel and think that the approach towards the fight against drug abuse is holistic and inclusive, which would include the increase in manpower, the number of manpower recruited in the institutions to fight drugs, the number of support that the institution have to its disposal, and of course the political will. We also need to commensurate that with a strong legislation, which we already have. But again, around the world, there's nowhere you fight drugs without money. So when you want to deal with the fight against drug abuse, it means all hands needs to be on deck.
Michael G. Please, a narcotic expert and former spokesperson of the Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency. In the world of sports, the Ghana Football Association, GFA, has announced that the Ghana Premier League, GPL, is set to return on Friday, March 7, 2025, after 3 weeks of no action following hooliganism attacks that led to the death of one person. The Ghana FA today announced that the return of the league is subject to the safety and security assurance inspection of all venues currently being undertaken by the GFA and the Ministry for Sports and Recreation. The FA is in recent days have been training stakeholders to enhance match-day safety and security protocols as part of measures to avoid further hooligan incidents at various stadiums. The league had been put on hold due to Asante Kotoko requesting for improved measures from the FA following the death of fan Francis Nanapole Frimpong during the league game in Nswatre. Asante Kotoko earlier this week announced their readiness to return to competitive football after the death of their die-hard supporter, which is scheduled for March 6. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Umo Daniogo for the technical support. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, Instagram at WADR English, and on Facebook, WADR English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is our flagship gender program, 50-50 with Nadiri Tete, to be followed at the top of the hour of 1 p.m. by the second edition of our comprehensive news package in French, Info Chez Vous, with Demba Amaran. I'm Abdullahi Hassan. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New